All right, here we go. I'm going to try something a little new here. I'm going to be doing a few video blogs to discuss some topics that I've previously covered in my online blogs. Just all things corset, things relating to questions that people frequently have about corsets. And I thought I would start off the first one talking about what is a corset. First of all, let me introduce myself. I am Diana DeNoble of Starker's Corsetry, and I've been making corsets custom made to measure here in Toronto since 1992. And I firmly believe in custom made to measure corsets that are made drafting the pattern for the individual client to make sure that bones aren't going to be squished or broken, or comfort isn't going to be compromised. They're very safe to wear. Well, they give you a lovely curve all at the same time. I don't like the idea of compressing the ribs. That obviously is dangerous. Ribs can break, organs can puncture. Not so ideal. Anyway, what is a corset? It's basically a garment that can be worn over the torso in general, with compressive qualities, usually containing a busk, which I have here. This is a traditional corset busk with the hooks and the eyes, and this runs along the front of the corset so that you can close it easily when the laces are loose at the back. And it pretty much, shows, hey, this is a corset. Most traditional corsets do have these. However, there are some that I make that don't, but it makes it a little bit easier to put the corset on when you have the busk and the back lacing is happening as well. So let me show you how that actually looks on a corset that I have here. So here's what it looks like when it's inside of a corset. This is how the front of a corset is traditionally done up, right? I prefer to use these instead of zippers. I find, especially in the past 10 years, that the quality of zippers anywhere is terrible. They fall apart, and I don't trust the zipper construction to stand as long as the construction of my corsets. So I always flat out refuse to make corsets with zippers for that reason. I'll make them with a flat front with no busk closure at all, but I personally don't like zippers in the front of a corset. I want my corsets to last a very long time. Also, what's found in a traditional corset is steel corset bones. Now this is a flat steel. It's a ½ inch. This one's about 14 inches long. But I tend to place these beside the busk closures at the front of the corset. And then there's also the 1/4 inch flat steel, which is usually placed along the back. Now these ones here bend only front and back. I like these for placement in the corset where the movement isn't quite as much as it would be, say, at the side of the corset. Now, at the side of the corset, I like to use these guys here, the spiral bones. Now, they are also made of steel, but they're very, very flexible, so they can mold over top of the ribs and hips. And while it'll keep the structure of the fabric, it's not going to dig into the sides of your ribs, say the way some of these guys could if they were placed at the side of the ribs. Now, I like to do them in double pockets at the side, as you can see. I don't know if you can see here. Bear with me here. Let me get some light. There we go. Yeah. So there's the 2 pockets right here. I usually put them one beside each other like that, just to allow for more flexibility in the corset. Mine are constructed mostly to keep in mind the movement and comfort of the corset wearer, specifically who the individual is who will be wearing it. Now, corsets also have the back laces. I'll show you this one here again, the back. So the corsets all have bear with me, the laces in the back here. So it's easier to do up and adjust to your body. And also it's easier to loosen it up as you may need to. Sometimes during the day you'll obviously eat and drink and be a little bit active throughout the day, and you might need to loosen the corset a little bit. So you can do that, you can adjust it to your comfort. what else does a corset typically have? Um, I like to put the back protector behind the laces so that your skin doesn't show behind the laces. Ta-da! Now, what a corset is not is a Merry Widow, elasticized body shaper, or girdle. Those are completely different things. Now, some corsets may contain underwires or zippers. The underwire under the bust. Zippers, you'll see them in corsets. You know how I feel about those already. They can be made in any materials like satin, brocade, leather, latex, faux fur. I've made them out of old combat pants before. And they can be made out of pretty much anything. The typical corset fabric that's used is a coutil, which is traditional corset fabric. It's found in the base layers of many corsets, although you'll find some single-layer corsets made just with coutil and maybe a waist tape on the inside. It's a great fabric that it's very durable, very strong, holds its shape really nicely. It's quite stiff, but it can mold to your body, kind of like a pair of shoes. It doesn't stretch out of shape. And I sew all of my base fabrics onto the coutil layer in the corset. Now, the coutil layer in the corsets that I make for Starker's Corsetry, you can't see the coutil layer unless you get to come in person and see the in-process fitting. If you get to come in for the corset fitting, you'll kind of see the layers that go onto the inside. That's very traditional with corsets, the coutil. And they're more and more often in previous centuries as a foundation garment to smooth out the torso under the clothing and to hold the bust up, and just so that the clothing can fit nice and smoothly over the body. They weren't traditionally worn incredibly tight-laced like you'll see some of the photos or hear some of the stories. I usually compare them to really high stiletto heels or really high platform heels. Some women will wear them, but definitely not all women all the time. Some women didn't wear corsets at all, but most who did wear corsets, they wore them fairly loosely, enough that they could do things throughout the day and still be reasonably comfortable, especially during the time when they were almost all entirely custom made to measure. They weren't traditionally worn so tightly where women would be fainting all the time as you would normally see. I think those are just the most sensational stories people could find. So of course they make for way better stories than, oh yeah, a woman wore a corset her whole life and nothing dramatic happened. People love the fainting and the ribs cracking and all those horrible things, and those are traditionally the stories that we hear about corsets. Now, there were the ribs breaking and the women fainting, don't get me wrong, that did occur. And I think women will break an ankle with big, crazy high heels. And, I think any extreme of anything is, you're risking, you're putting yourself at risk with any extreme. But I think a lot of people find that risk is worth it for them. And that's great. Now, so obviously, women haven't been wearing them quite as much the past 100 or so years. Around 1910, bras started to happen, and women decided that they didn't really want corsets quite so much, so they opted for just a more slim girdle that gave them more of a, the 1920s sort of tube shape. And they would start to abandon the restrictive corsets that the previous generation loved to wear, because it was the 1920s, 1910s, everything was new, and you could buy so many things just ready-made at a store now, and it was really quite exciting, and fashion was changing so much, and the silhouette changed quite a bit. So nobody wanted the Gibson girl curve with the S shape that you would see, which did push the torso forward a little bit and the bum backwards a little bit, which overall wasn't the healthiest shape historically. Even for corsets that weren't worn very tightly, it wasn't a very comfortable or sustainable style. So women would just, not wear as many corsets. There was, the body shapers that still helped the clothing to fall a little smoother along the body. So now, who wears them? Well, people who choose to. Obviously, it's not expected in our day-to-day wear to wear a corset. It's quite unusual, frankly. And I think there's lots of different people who will wear corsets now. I think the past 20, 30 years, it's been a mainstay of Gothic wardrobe. And when I began Starker's Corsetry, it was mostly goths who were seeking these out, and people in the fetish scene, and it was very commonly worn in those circles, and it was pretty fun to design the Gothic styles way back then, and it certainly still is part of the wardrobe. But now I'm seeing a lot more diversity in who's going to be wearing a corset. There's more trans women are coming to me wanting more of a curve for their waist, because the bones are different than they want them to be, so let's shape a waist under the bones safely and effectively. And brides, there's a lot of corsets in weddings because they're a beautiful garment that can be worn as a centerpiece of the wedding dress. They can have beads, they can have appliques, and the great part is that they're adjustable. So the stress of a wedding, a lot of women will gain or lose a little bit of water here and there, and the corset still fits them, even if their weight fluctuates 10 pounds the last week, which things happen. So a lot of weddings, and or underneath their wedding dress is sort of a very solid body shaper under their wedding dress. Also, just people who want something sexy or unique to wear as part of their fashion wardrobe. Parties, New Year's Eve, they're really big. Halloween, this past Halloween has just been a really big one for corsets and corset gowns. We did a really great Grim Reaper corset dress that's probably one of my favorites that I've made. And next year is a big Halloween as well. Halloween is on a Saturday next year, so there's a lot of Halloween weddings, and with a corset you can be really dramatic with your wedding design. And also more recently too, people with back issues have been coming to me for corsets, and I've kind of been reluctant over the years to make corsets for that reason. Of course, I'm not a licensed orthopedic garment manufacturer, but I did have a fairly severe back injury 2 years ago, and I wore a corset before I ultimately ended up having surgery for my back. And the corset brought the pain down. It isolated and stabilized the core, and it gave a little light traction on my spine. Now, I don't necessarily recommend wearing corsets for this reason. Some doctors will recommend to their patients to get a brace or a corset stabilizer. So I've had people with the doctor's notes and things like that, because I do get very nervous making corsets other than just for aesthetic reasons. But for back pain, for a lot of people, it has worked. It certainly worked for me until it didn't, and surgery was required, but that's a whole other story. Anyway, who else wears corsets? Fitness people. Now, I'm going to get into that quite a bit, probably in my next video or two. I have very strong feelings about corsets and fitness, especially for fitness competitors. That's kind of been a thing the past 2 years I've especially noticed. And the more I've learned about it, the more I strongly disagree with fitness competitors wearing corsets to achieve a smaller waist, especially when they're already incredibly fit, active people who have impeccable diets. And anyway, I will get into that whole can of worms soon. And also, okay, who else? Costumes for play. Historical, Renaissance fair, people love costumes and corsets for those. You can sort of style them for any different era. You can, have a corset that's sort of styled to be more of an Elizabethan look with the tabs on the bottom and the shoulder straps. And you can have one styled, from somewhere in the 1800s, or we could do like a Marie Antoinette sort of look. There's historically, if you want kind of an interesting shape from a different era, a corset is usually a good base to go for those. And who else? Just because you want to wear a corset. That's also a lot of people who come to me are just curious. They want to wear a corset. They love the look. They love the idea of it, and they want to do it safely without something that they just buy in a store that could potentially squish their ribs or hip bones or mash their organs in. So. They want something that's kind of pretty, something that's kind of fun, or they like the idea of wearing a corset under their business suit, or it helps them to achieve better posture. There are, many different reasons for many different people about why they would want to wear a corset. So I hope I have covered what is a corset and who wears them in this video blog, and I'm sure there's many things that I've missed and haven't covered. I'm doing this all raw to start with. I'm not a video editor at all, so I'm probably just going to throw this all up as is. I am terribly sorry, but that's how it goes. And if you wanted to get in touch with me or have any questions or comments or suggestions about a video blog you'd like me to do, or something, a corset style you would like to see or discuss, please let me know. You can reach me through email, info@starkers.com. You can get me on Facebook at, all one word, Starkers Corsetry, and Twitter, Starkers_corset, and Instagram, Starkers_corsets. I have been wildly inconsistent with naming all of these. I do apologize. Also, the best way if you want to reach me or see my work is at my website, starkers.com. So that's www.starkers.com. And that's about it for now. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks.